Oh,
All right. All right. I'm letting everybody in. Okay.
okay. Hello and welcome as you enter the room. Welcome to the IRB webinar for today. We're going to take just a minute to let the people in who are in the waiting room, and I can see the numbers going up and down, so people are coming in as we let them in. So give us just a second to get started, and we'll hope you'll enjoy our webinar today. You can use the chat function to tell us where you're calling in from if you want to. I'm in Terre Haute, Indiana, in the Midwest of the United States. And it's always interesting to see where people are calling in from, I guess, streaming in from. Is that the right way to say it? Um, but we'll get started formally in just another minute or so. I'd like to give people a chance to pop in. I know it's hard to sometimes make these meetings at this time of the day, so we welcome everyone who's come. And in just a minute, we'll get started. Again, for those of you just coming in, if you want to share where you're from, use the chat function. See, we already have several people who have shared where they're from. We'll do a more formal introduction here in just a second as we get started. I'd like to wait until 2 minutes after. And I think we are very close to that point. So hopefully we'll see more people popping in. We have a nice group already. And welcome to the IRB webinar for today, pre-application steps, the application process, and application specifics. You've seen the description when you signed up, but generally here is what we're going to be talking about. Obviously, it's going to be the application. So we're going to start with some of the basic ideas, move into the process, and then show you some really specific views of the application. We're going to talk about supplemental documents that you include with your application and the system itself, Cayuse. So you can see that there. That's the name of the platform that we use, Cayuse, and it's a separate third-party platform. So we'll show you that. We'll show you resources for how to use that. And then we're also going to talk about information regarding what happens after you apply. See, we're still letting people in, which is great. So welcome to our webinar. For those of you that are just coming in, we're just getting started. My name's Chad Becker. I am an IRB Education Analyst, and we have Kelly Tribble here with us today, who's also an IRB Education Analyst. I believe you can all see Kelly.
Hello.
Um, and as I was saying earlier, for those of you who came in a little bit later, I'm in Terre Haute, Indiana, in the Midwest of the United States of America. And I've been living here in Indiana for about 25 years, so about half of my life now. And I'm from Buffalo, New York. Kelly, you want to introduce yourself, where you are, and
Yeah. I'm in Tyler, Texas. That's the eastern part of Texas, about 90 miles from Shreveport, Louisiana. And really pleased to be here today. I'll be working with you in the chat and also answering questions via the Q&A. So please comment away in the chat as much as you'd like. But if you have an actual question, we'd love that to come through the Q&A board.
And
Thanks.
again, if you want to share where you are, please use the chat function for that. We always like to see where our folks are calling in from. So for some details here, as Kelly alluded to, how to use the Q&A and these kinds of things, where to find the resources afterwards. For the recorded webinar, we're going to post that to the IRB website, the web page for webinars on our site. I'll also have the PowerPoint presentation there, and you can use this PowerPoint presentation to remind yourself of the webinar and also to use it as a launching pad for links. You'll see there's quite a few hyperlinked words and in this presentation that you can use to find the specific web page rather than going to our website, which is sometimes unwieldy due to its size, and link directly to the web page you're looking for. We're also going to have this posted on our YouTube channel. So if you've not been to our YouTube channel, we do have other videos there, not just large webinars that are 45 minutes to an hour, but also short help videos that are 2 to 4 minutes long that can help you along the way as you apply to the IRB. The questions that we get through the Q&A function, so let me just sort of differentiate between the chat, which is more social, and the Q&A, which is where we'll look during this presentation for substantive questions about the content of the presentation. So please use the Q&A function to submit questions, and we will do our best to answer those questions throughout the webinar today. Kelly is going to help with that. When a question comes in, Kelly will likely provide the written answer, but then also kind of kick a few up to me that are good for the group, and everyone can hear the verbal answer. That way, you can ask a follow-up question in the Q&A, right? So we're not going to wait to the end to try to answer a bunch of questions. We're not going to just use a Q&A document. We're going to try to answer them live so that people do have that opportunity to ask a follow-up question if needed. We will supply the finalized Q&A, however, on our webinar's webpage as well. So you can go back and read through that. You can also look at any of our other past webinars, the PowerPoint slides associated with those, and the Q&As associated with those. I think we have about 6 different topics up on our website right now for webinars, with a couple of repeats. We like to about every year repeat our webinars because we have a different group of cohort coming through regarding our students, and our students do make up a substantial portion of who utilizes our services. So we like to not be redundant, but to repeat ourselves as needed so everybody gets the information that they need. So you can go to our webinars page and find quite a bit of good information and spend several hours watching webinars if you wanted to regarding different topics. So we're going to jump into the purpose of the IRB really quickly, and then I'm going to give you kind of a brief overview of what we're going to specifically talk about here in our presentation. But before I get started, I don't imagine there's any questions, Kelly, but let me just ask, just in case.
Nope, not yet.
Great. I see we have quite a bit of chat going on, which is great. I look forward to reading that later and seeing where people are calling in from. So what is an IRB? Well, an IRB is an institutional review board, and institutions kind of buy into this federal kind of rule, federal policy, if they want to have kind of ethical research and be able to say, yes, the research that's done at our institution is ethical. So they join the they join the IRB, they have a board at their institution, and then that board works to protect the rights and welfare of human subjects in research, and it's essentially derived from the common rule, which is the federal policy for the protection of human subjects. It's linked here. If you're into reading legal texts, it's interesting. I like certain technical texts myself, and it is kind of interesting to see the legal language that's used and just what this means to do ethical research. So we're not, however, a committee that provides guidance regarding these components. So for the students in the audience, programmatic components for all PIs, whether it be academic or methodological aspects of research, that's not our purview. That would be for students, that would be your chair, your committee, your faculty sponsor, the teacher of your class, if you're in a master's level class, that kind of thing. For staff and faculty and administrators, of course, it would be you and your cohort of researchers, or maybe you and your colleagues talking to make sure that you have those components correct based upon best practices for methodology, for design, and for students for your program. Unless, of course, these components themselves present risk to human subjects. So we do kind of step in sometimes when people are choosing, I guess, activities related to their research design, related to their methodology that are risky. And if we see those as risky, we will say something. But we are not providing guidance regarding what you should do regarding the academic components of your work. We're really in the business of protecting the rights and welfare of human subjects. Some key information about us. We have resources and services, and I'm going to talk to you about what those are briefly. Um, and they're open to all NU community members at any time. That includes any level of students, faculty, staff, and administrators. You do not need to be in a certain course. Okay. You can use our services and resources at any time in your program if you're a student. And if you're a dissertation student specifically, you do not need to be in courses with these numbers. For those of you that are in those programs, even though that might be called the IRB course, you can come to us sooner. So if you know what you're doing, if you're ready to learn from us and read read through our resources in conjunction with what you're putting together as your research project, you can do that at any time. All right, so this webinar will be a quick tour of our resources and services, and then we'll talk about the application. We're going to talk about steps prior. We're going to talk about the process and getting it started, and then we're going to talk about some specifics within that application platform that's called Cayuse. We're also going to talk about what to expect after the application. Don't imagine we have any questions yet. We haven't really covered any content, so uh, a tour of our resource.
There is one interesting one that we can
Okay.
just keep in mind as you're going through. Somebody's doing research on American Indians, specifically Choctaw, and I went ahead and pointed them to our web page
Mhm.
with that documentation about working with Native populations, indigenous populations. But if you have anything to add about that as you're going through this process, I just wanted to give you a heads up about that.
Sure, great. And I do have to admit, it could be either in the Learn IRB requirements or the special guidance page. Kelly, do you remember which one you sent them to?
Yeah, it's the Learn IRB
Yeah,
requirements.
Learn IRB requirements. We have several help documents, one of which does pertain to American Indian, Native Alaskan American Indian uh, research populations. And typically, what that means is there's guidance there to help you understand the requirements for doing a study like that. Specifically, with these populations, working closely with the leadership of the indigenous population is one of the main requirements. We also have other special guidance and IRB requirements for other populations, children, prisoners, pregnant women, various different kinds of populations. So this dovetails nicely with the resources that we have available. We have a getting started page, which is a wonderful place to start for those of you who are maybe here just getting started with the process. Gives you 5 basic steps to follow that will really put you on your way toward a successful application. We have more specific guidance documents on our Learn IRB requirements and special guidance sections. And of course, these are linked right here from our hyperlinked words. This is a big tab, Prepare IRB Documents. So when you get to our website, you'll see this quite prominently. And there's a pull down menu with help pages for things like eligibility requirements, recruitment materials, consent materials, site permissions, and about 6 or 7 other components that might be included in your study. Every study is different. Some studies require more documentation than others. It just depends on what you're doing, if you're using human subjects, and how you plan on interacting with them. We have templates on the Prepare IRB documents subpages that you will use to create your supplemental documents. And following those templates is going to make your life easier because we require them to be in the templated format. So make sure you're understanding that if there is a template for the supplemental document you're including, to be using that. We have our links to our services, which I'll talk about here in a second. We have help materials. I've mentioned those short videos, but we also have written guides, text guides that you can utilize as well. And we have our YouTube channel. We publish bi-monthly newsletters, and those are available on our website as well. I usually put them on the home page, and we put them on our newsletter page, and then they go out to all faculty and staff. So the hope is that your faculty that you're working with pass those along, but we don't actually have a direct conduit to students. So we do try to get those newsletters in the hands of people who need them, but they're a nice little one-page linkable resource for you to keep up on the major happenings in the IRB. For our services, we offer a couple of different kinds. Customized group sessions where you interact with staff. So these would be short presentations and then verbal and written feedback on the document that you may or may not submit prior to the group session. So we have group sessions on eligibility criteria, recruitment materials, and consent materials. And if you follow the links here to sign up for those, you'll see directions on how to do that. They are regularly occurring and self-schedulable. So when you go to our website, you will see the availability and you will be able to register, upload any materials that you want reviewed, and then during the session, be provided with a short content presentation followed by verbal and written feedback for each of the attendees who have submitted. So these are a wonderful resource for those of you who need help preparing your documents. You've reviewed everything online, you've taken a try at creating it, and now you want it reviewed. We also have a group session where you don't submit anything, but you learn about the IRB application. So you'll see a few screenshots of it later, but in this group session, you will go into much more depth about the IRB application. So 4 different kinds of group sessions, 3 of which are a bit more interactive, and 1 covers the details of the IRB application. Office hours are very important for some people who have specific questions that can't be answered by reviewing our website, by coming to our group sessions, by emailing the IRB. You can sign up for office hours in the same way that you sign up for group sessions from our website. And then, of course, we hold our webinars, and we do have a webinars page, as I said, devoted to housing all of the different webinars, and you can take a look through those as you wish. So the steps prior to application. Getting started with IRB, right? This is the first page from my list of resources 2 slides ago, and this is essentially what you'll see here on that page. The first step is to complete city training if you haven't done it already. The next is to review our institutional policies in case you are working with a population that has special considerations, and to be sure that you're following our rules. No data collection when you're not in a class, right? These kinds of things. So please review those since they are multifaceted and you don't want to run afoul of any of our institutional policies. We ask you to consider the feasibility of your study. Sometimes people come with great academic ideas, but they may not be feasible research ideas, especially given the time that you have available to do your research. If you are a master's student and you have a very short period of time, you'll want to think about how you can complete an entire research study. If you're a dissertation student who might be working on it for a couple of years, you still want to think about, is this something that I can complete in the time frame that my coursework, my program kind of allows. Not just time, but other feasibility concerns. Can I reach the population? Can I get the information that I'm looking for from that population? So we have a tool there that you can utilize to test the feasibility of your study, or at least to give you and possibly your faculty sponsor, your chair, or any colleagues that you're working with an opportunity to discuss the study that's being proposed and how doable it is. We want you to register for any group sessions that you need help for to create those supplemental materials, and then we'll get you started in Cayuse with some quick start guides. So we're going to go through those quick start guides a little bit later so you can see what I mean by that. But you can link here from here to the getting started page, and then you can find the quick start guides there as well. All right. So steps required prior to application include for all primary investigators. So that would be any student, any staff member, faculty member who is submitting an application. You are a primary investigator, a PI. Common materials are including recruitment materials, consent materials, a permission form, or two or three, depending on where you're potentially utilizing private resources, and any data collection instruments. These are common across almost all the studies that we see with human subjects. We have those group services that will help you construct many of these materials, referred to those earlier. And then for students, committee approval of your dissertation or your doctoral proposal. For dissertation students, if you're a non-dissertation student, so possibly a master's degree student, an NU affiliated sponsor must agree that your study is ready for application. That could be the instructor of your course, and that this is a course assignment, and so that's the person who's affiliated and working with you. Or it could be that you're doing research at the master's level and you have found someone who can be a sponsor for you to submit your IRB application. We have had that happen before. And in either scenario, we would need a sponsor if you're a student. You can't just apply to the IRB without having some sponsor, whether it be your chair, your faculty sponsor, or another NU affiliated sponsor. All right. Any questions so far, Kelly, coming through that would be useful for the group?
Not really. There was one question that was um, there was one question about, a lot of researchers are quite sure that they're either not doing technically research or they're not researching with human subjects, and they're wondering, do I still need to go through the city training program? Do I still need to submit an IRB application, that sort of thing? And I thought that might be a
Yes, we do get that question frequently. Say you're using archival data that already been collected, possibly publicly available data that's available on a website, maybe private data that someone's already collected, so you're not specifically working with human subjects. When you're doing a research presentation, or I'm sorry, when you're doing a research project for, and this is for like our faculty, staff, and dissertation students for publication. Okay. So all the people essentially that come through because they want to disseminate their information. So if it's for publication, then you do have to go through the IRB. Many master's level theses are published as well. Ours are here at NU, and so those would also require IRB approval. The other aspect is it research? So the only way for us as an institution to know if it's research or not is for the researcher to submit it, and then we make the determination. So if you're doing research in your role at NU, whether it be as a student, staff, faculty member, staff, or administrator, and you're doing research, you do have to submit to the IRB. The IRB will then make that determination as to whether or not it is human subjects research or non-human subjects research, NHSF. NHSR, sorry, non-human subjects research. And then we will send you a note that says this is non-human subjects research, or we will review it as human subjects research. So the short answer is yes. The long answer is a little more complicated and hopefully gives you an idea of why, as an institution, if we're going to be overseeing research, the IRB has to see everything to make that determination. We don't allow researchers to make that determination on their own. It may be very obvious that you're not working with human subjects, you're getting some, Department of Education data or something like that, but we need to see it because it's research that's happening under the auspices of um, NU. Hopefully that answered the question. If you have a follow-up question with that, please let us know. So starting your application then, it's time to submit. You've completed your supplemental documents. You've utilized the resources and services that you needed to create your application. And now it's time to apply. So I've linked the application page along with the quick start guides page here, as well as how-to videos for how to start your application, how to complete your application, how to submit your application, right? So we have help materials for every step of the way, and they're linked here. This is a view of our website. So submitting to IRB webpage. And here are the quick start guides. Now, as of today, we will no longer be using Legacy NU and Legacy NCU to discuss the differences between the two groups of students, mostly dissertation students, who come through the IRB. Instead, we will be switching to utilizing the language of those who are in the one-to-one program and those who are in the group-based program. My hope is that everyone in the room, either faculty or staff or students, is familiar with this, as several emails have come out over the last week or two describing this change in nomenclature, but also the ways in which you will function within our platforms. So how you're going to log in, how you're going to do your coursework in, get to your courses. And then for us, this has implications about where we send you to log in to Cayuse. So these guides work still for those of you who know that you started under NCU and are now an NU student. You're the legacy NCU students. And for those of you who have always been NU students, then you are legacy NU students. And they'll still work. We just need to change the nomenclature from one-to-one to group-based. And I believe those of you who are in those programs know which one you are. So hopefully you don't have any questions about this, because it is a little complicated as we transition to a single sign-on, to a single student information system, and to a single learning management system. And all that is going to take a little bit of time. So we have these instructions here, depending on which cohort you're in, what type of program you're in. And then here are those help materials that I referred to just a few slides ago. We have how to log in and begin your application. We have how to complete it, how to do certain very specific things within it, which we've found that primary investigators have trouble doing. So how to add yourself and how to add your sponsor or chair, as well as how to add any additional study personnel. We've added to this list and there are other videos and help materials as well. These are the ones that are mostly devoted to the application. And you can link to our YouTube channel that also has other help videos. Now let's get into some specifics about the actual applying. So we want you to utilize those quick guides, those short videos, and we want you to create all of those supplemental documents and materials. We want you to get into the Cayuse platform using that quick start guide. And then we're going to show you what it looks like once you get in there. What we use in Cayuse are written kind of text windows and then check marks or radio buttons for you to choose answers for each page. As you go throughout the application, that's what you're going to do. You're going to be checking boxes, and then you're going to be providing written comments that correspond with your research proposal, whatever that might be, whether it be an actual dissertation proposal or for faculty, a little prospectus that you should put together, and then also match what your materials, your supplemental materials show. So you need to make sure that as you go through, you're providing answers that are consistent with the other materials that you're using for your research project. We're going to have opportunities throughout the application to upload those supplemental documents. And then once all the pages are complete, the option to submit your application opens. Cayuse is a system that saves as you go. You don't really have to save yourself. Correct me if I'm wrong, Kelly. Is there a save button on each page?
There is, but one of the beauties of Cayuse is that every time you move from one page to another, all your work is saved
Okay,
everywhere. So it's rarely you have to be prompted to save something.
thank you. That's great because you could spend time typing in a very complex answer and move to the next page, forget to save it, and now it's gone. So Cayuse saves your material as you go. You also have the option to save at any point using the save button. And then so the point larger point being you can come back to it, right? You can work on it for an hour. You can come back to it a week later, and it will be there. And as you work through, you will be prompted. You will be told when you have completed each page. I'm going to show you a few screenshots now to make that seem real. So here is an example Cayuse application view. You can see the tabs on the left correspond to different sections of the application, and the one that's highlighted is the one that is open in front of us. You can navigate to each section by simply clicking on the section, and it'll show in this larger view. These are typical sections for a human subjects research project. General info, study objectives, study design. In this particular study, we're working with adults, human subjects. So we have a recruitment section. We have a couple of more sections about costs, risks, privacy. And then we also have an important section about informed consent. So here is an example where we would have recruitment and need recruitment supplemental documents, and informed consent, and we would need the informed consent supplemental documents. We ask about your investigator experience. And then there's also other sections that open up depending on the answers that you give. In this particular study that I'm highlighting, those adults are also in an educational setting. So as you answer questions, different sections will open up depending on the choices that you've made on previous pages. We don't have time to get into it all here, but if you do come to our group session for the IRB application, we show you that in a bit more detail. You start off with a general info page. However you answer on that page will open up other pages. If you're doing an archival study with existing information, you may only have 3 or 4 sections that you have to complete. If you are working with adults, if you're working with children, you will have more sections to complete and more supplemental documents to provide. You can see that we have radio button or check marks here for attestation of doing certain things before applying. We also have helpful links so that you can work back to our web page if you need to right from the application. I have a couple of more views to show you of specific pages like recruitment and informed consent. But before I do so, let me check and see if there's any questions.
Nope. We're clean out of questions and answers.
All right, okay. So it depends on the group. Sometimes people have a lot of questions, sometimes people don't. We do still have time. We're not in a hurry. So if you have a question, please ask it and we can stop and answer. So the next view shows the adults recruitment page from that same study. And you can see we have a few choices that we need to make with check marks. And in this particular study, we're going to be using online recruitment. We're also going to be sending emails to recruit, and we're employing snowball sampling as a sampling technique in addition. So we've checked all 3 boxes. You can see here that if you're using a recruitment technique that is not listed above, then you would check here, a box would open up and you would describe a text box and you would describe what your recruitment method is. If you choose one of these, you don't have to worry about that. So that's why it's not open. So the application kind of opens and closes not only pages, but sections within pages, depending on the choices that you make. Oops, sorry about that. And as you can see on this recruitment page, since we checked that we had materials that we were going to use online and through email, we have the requirement to upload those materials so that the analyst who is reviewing the application can see that you have completed those materials correctly, that they not only say the things that you've answered in other sections or reflect the answers that you've given in other sections, but that they follow our templates and that they're appropriate for the level of risk being assigned to the study. For
Hi, I
this, yes,
I'm sorry. I have a question.
yes, yeah,
Um,
we can take a question. Normally, we ask that you
yes.
stay on mute and put it into the chat, but I know not everyone has, or put it into the Q&A, but I know not everyone has access to the Q&A depending on which device they're on. Since we're doing well on time, go ahead, Gene.
Okay. My question is this: if I want to do a consent form for a field test reviewer, do I use the regular consent form and edit it, or is there a specific one for that reviewer?
So a field test, is that what you said?
Yes.
So field tests are not to be typically to be published. They're really just a tool, right, to be utilized by the researcher to get ready for the application, to get ready for the research study, to create the final instrument that you're going to be using, right? That you would then submit to your IRB application. And for that reason, and you should never include data that you gain from a field test, an instrument test, in any published work, because it's really just kind of behind the scenes work. And for that reason, you do not need IRB approval to do a field test on an instrument.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Yep. All right, so this is the recruitment page. It's not the entirety of the page. There's a text block below here where you describe your process for recruiting. So exactly how you're going to do it. I'm going to get email addresses from, the human resources department of a specific corporation, and I have a permission, to do that. And then you would provide that permission in a later section. So there's also a text window here for you to describe how you're recruiting, where you're recruiting, so that we know that you have permission to do that, that it's a reasonable thing to do, and that you have provided the right materials to us so that we know when you go out there to recruit that you're using the right materials. You're not going to use an email on Facebook, right? You're going to create a nice uh, kind of graphic to put on Facebook rather than a simple text email. So we have templates for all the different kinds of recruitment materials that you would need to provide for your study. Please utilize those and then upload them to your application. Okay, so the next view is of the informed consent section. I did have to trim this down on the screenshot a little bit so you don't see some of the later sections that you saw in the previous view. But we have moved down to the informed consent section of that study. And now you can see here again, in addition to some links and resources, we're asking for a description of how you're going to gain informed consent. Where and when will you obtain consent from adult participants? It's asking you this because we know that you're recruiting adults. If you were working with children, there would be a different prompt here for how you would gain consent from the parents and assent from the students. So again, as you choose different, uh, as you make different choices throughout the application, different sections open up, prompting you to provide information so that we can determine the level of risk regarding the human participants of your study. There will also be, or there is, just not shown in this screenshot, a place for you to upload your consent document or documents, depending on what type of study you were doing. So here is another example view of a page. that shows kind of how a text window looks within the application, in addition to those views of the radio buttons and check marks that we've shown before. Any questions at this point in the Q&A, Kelly?
Well, we do have a broad one that we might think about answering live. This one is simply, what resources or considerations do we need to keep in mind prior to IRB applications process? I wasn't quite
Yeah,
sure.
so certainly, kind of going back to some of the things that we discussed earlier in the presentation, prior to getting started, the best thing to do is go to our webpage, look at the first few tabs on our webpage, which is our home, kind of about us, the getting started page, and then the institutional requirements and special guidance. That, and following the 5 steps on the getting started page is the proper way to prepare yourself for creating those supplemental documents that you need and beginning your IRB application, where you will answer questions describing to us what it is that you're going to be doing and providing us with any supplemental documents necessary. So that getting started page, of course, is your city requirements, reviewing institutional policies, thinking about the feasibility of your study, utilizing any of our services, and then, of course, going to the apply page and getting started with the application. So that would be my answer to that question. And if you look, when we put this PowerPoint on the website within 24 hours, you can come back and read through those first handful of slides, link directly to our getting started page, and then really have a good idea of how to get started prior to your plan. All right. So we have now applied, you've submitted. Here's what happens when that point has been reached. So I just spilled some water on this. have to move a few things. After the application, we have a review process. And I want to make sure that you understand the review process as best as you can, because it is a little complicated. We are a very efficient IRB. We feel that we know that we're well below the national average for how long it takes for someone to receive an IRB review from us. And we're proud of that fact. We'll admit it. We think it's useful for students. It's useful for everyone, but especially students who are on tight timelines. So to give you a sense of what it looks like when you apply, you submit, and then if you are a student, you'll go to the next step. If you're not a student, you'll skip to the IRB pre-review step. For students, you do need to have your chair or faculty sponsor review your application. And when you apply, you choose them as your faculty sponsor or your chair, and they are put on your application, which means they receive the communications from the IRB that you do. So when you submit, they are notified through email, and they go in and review your submission and approve it, essentially. It's called certification. So they go in, they make sure everything looks right. We're not asking them to do a full review. We just want to make sure that everything seems right. And then it comes to us. So that can take as long as it takes your chair to do that. So I always recommend that people say to their chair or their faculty sponsor, "Hey, I just submitted. Just wanted to let you know that it's waiting for you." However, you can, tactfully do that. And that way it doesn't sit in the chair's inbox. Once it does come from the chair or directly from you, if you're a faculty member, staff member, or administrator, then it's IRB pre-review. And this usually takes 2 days, where we have an administrator look at it, make sure that it's complete. Okay, not doing a review of it, just making sure that it looks like all of the materials are included. and then they assign it to an analyst. I'm going to go through the typical length of each of these stages in a second, but just wanted to give you an overall process review. So the pre-review takes a couple of days. The IRB review takes longer because it is where our analysts go in and check everything. They're going to be inserting comments if need be, requiring revisions for certain things if necessary. You can see that there's some circular arrows. Changes may be requested at any of these points, and if so, your chair would send it back to you, or our administrator would send it back to you, or the analyst would send it back to you, depending on which stage you are in. Once you have an approvable application, it enters that IRB post review, and then an IRB determination letter is issued. This will come through your institutional email address, so just make sure you're checking that for any documents or any reviews from the IRB. So that's the process. Now let's talk about this in a touch more detail with times associated with it. So the PI, possibly if they're a student, works with their chair. IR pre-review may need to come back and forth between the PI. The formal review, the analysts may have feedback and require revisions back and forth with the PI, and then a determination and a notification. Now the times for so here is an example of the letter that you will get for an approved study. So this will come into your email. Once you receive this email, you can begin recruiting or essentially accessing data. If it's an archival data study, begin recruiting if it's a human subjects study. And then how long does it take? So we hope that the chair only takes 1 or 2 days, but again, this depends on the faculty sponsor or the chair. Again, it's always good to send them a notification through email. The pre-review takes 1 to 2 days. That's the triage review that our administrator does to make sure it's complete. The formal IRB review done by an analyst, which would then provide you with any feedback and revision requirements, would take 7 to 10 business days. And then once that's determined, it essentially happens right away. So on that 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th day, whenever they end up doing their review, as soon as they finish their review, that determination and notification happens within an hour. So we do put 1 day there, but it's pretty much instantaneous once the analyst says, okay, this is a satisfactory review. The goal of these webinars, of these resources, of these services, of our help materials is to make this 7 to 10 days in the middle happen once, right? That's the goal, is to just get it in and get it approved by the first analyst who looks at it. A lot of times there is a revision request, but we really want that to just be 1 max. Now, when you get into a cycle where you're going back and forth with the analyst, it can chew up a lot of time. So utilizing our resources, our services can help cut down this timeline and move you along in your program. Any questions at this point, Kelly?
Nope, we're good. We've had about 10 questions that I've managed to answer, but they were fairly specific to people's individual projects. So I haven't found one yet
That's great. Thanks for doing that. And yeah, if you want to read, anyone wants to read through the Q&A to see if any of those relate to your own situation, you might gain some info there. Again, we'll have that Q&A available on our website for anyone to go back and look through as well. So after IRB approval, then you've now gotten the letter. You've maybe done your initial stages of your study. There may be other IRB related events that require your action. So after initial submission is approved, you may have to modify your study. Now, this would be if you need to change any recruitment strategies. Maybe you decided to change your data collection instrument because you weren't getting the data you had hoped for. Maybe you need to expand your recruitment to larger groups of people. Maybe you need to change your eligibility requirements to open up your study to a larger population. There are numerous instances that might require a modification to your application, and we need to know about that to be sure that we can continue to protect human subjects. So in these scenarios, you would go back into Cayuse and you would create a modification for your initial submission. Just short form. You would attach any things that are changing, like a recruitment email or a consent and or a consent form, possibly a permission that you're adding for a new group of a new population that you're trying to access. And then you would provide a little bit of written information about what the modification is for. Those modifications usually take about 2 to 3 days for us to review and approve or send back for clarification. And then you can move on with your research. While we're reviewing what your modification is, we would ask that you not, engage in the modification. You can continue doing what we've approved, but don't change anything about how you're acting until you receive an approval of your modification. Hopefully you don't need to modify your study. It's not that common, but we do see them. Even less common is incident reporting, but it can happen, especially if you're doing a study with risky questions, if you are using a vulnerable population. So that is an option within Cayuse to report an incident. Doesn't mean that you've done something wrong. It doesn't mean that we're going to, require you to cease doing your research. It just means that if something happens, we need to know, especially if someone is triggered by questions or perhaps something happened where their identity was disclosed to others, these kinds of incidents. Now you can see in dark blue here, without the if needed asterisk, is the closure. So everybody must close their study. And that closure should only take place when you have ensured that you have all the data that you need. Okay. So on our website, you can see that we have a tab for after approval. And links to subpages for modifying your study and closing your study. We have help materials on those pages with directions for how to do that. When it's time to close your study, you need to make sure that you have completed these tasks, right? That you have collected and identified all the data, securely stored it, and then for dissertation students, completed chapters 4 or section 3, depending on your program and what your dissertation looks like, with committee approval. So that's your data analysis, right? With committee approval. So that means that your committee essentially agrees that you have enough data and that your analysis of that data is sufficient for moving forward. And you, at that point, no longer would need to collect any more data. We have a data collection verification form for those of you that need that in your program, and that's linked from our webpage. It's housed in the doctoral center. That is not an IRB requirement, so that is a programmatic requirement, but we do link you to that page from our website. And that form can be found here, so I've linked you to it. So you'll want to confer with your chair or faculty sponsor, fill out that form, make sure that you have agreement that you do not need any more data before you close your study, because you cannot reopen a study in Cayuse. You would have to start a new study over in Cayuse, and we would need to reapprove it if you needed more data. So make sure that you have all the data that you need before you close your study. A closure of your study for those students who need the data verification form, you also need the closure form for posting in your doctoral record. So make sure that you are keeping these forms, that you're following the process correctly for your program, and that you're reaching out with any questions that you might have about these elements to us and to your chair or faculty sponsor. Just some important reminders. We have those group sessions remember, for these different topics. And we have those wonderful one-to-one office hours where you can talk with a staff member for 15 minutes. That's usually enough time to get the answers that you need. We have the requirement of all supplemental materials being created before you can submit your application. And then, of course, for those students, we need to have an approved proposal. We do not look through the proposal. We do not even ask you to upload the proposal, but we do ask you to attest that you have a completed proposal. And if you don't, of course, you could have, there could be implications in your programmatic world from that. So make sure you have all the requirements before you apply to us, but do please utilize our resources and services at any time. If you have further questions, you can always email us. We are very responsive. Usually within 24 hours, you will receive a reply. And we get all kinds of emails. Where do I find this? I'm just getting started. What do I do? So, we are used to getting all different kinds of questions. We will point you toward the appropriate resource. And if it is a very specific question, we have the knowledge and experience to help you through that as well. Of course, our website, our services, our office hours, and our homepage is listed here for you. So any last questions in the Q&A, Kelly?
No, I think they've all been answered. Somebody did ask a question about, what if the scope of the number of participants were to change significantly? Not three or four more or three or four fewer, but um, if suddenly instead of interviewing 15 people, I was going to be interviewing 150, would the IRB want to know that? Should that be a modification? And I suggested that, yes, something that's significant we would want to know about. A handful plus or minus the number of people that you plan to recruit, I don't believe is something that would greatly affect
Yeah,
application.
yeah. So if there were to be a change, so usually when you're doing like interviews or questionnaires, you're doing a couple of handfuls, right? It's a 10 to 15, maybe it's 15 to 20, something like that max. If you were going to end up doing a few less or a few more, we wouldn't need to modify. Uh, we would we wouldn't be the ones that you would have to answer to if you decided to interview 150 people. I would think your chair would say, that's too many. Don't do that. But if it were something like that, we would definitely need to see it. What we often see is people say, well, the interviews isn't working. I'm not getting enough people to spend an hour with me. Now I'm thinking about creating an anonymous survey because and then for a survey study you do need about 150 people, right? It just depends on your power analysis. So after you've done that as part of your methodology for your dissertation, then you would know about how many people you needed. So that's where the IRB application comes in. You should already know based on your method and design about how many people you need, and then give us that range. If it's a qualitative study, give us the range of 10 to 20, and that's fine. If it's a quantitative study, give us what the power analysis told you that you need in order to have valid results. And then if you end up getting like 10 or 15 more that you want to include, again, that's fine. However, if you are making substantive changes like large differences in populations, or you're actually changing the way that you're interacting with that population, and that's why that number is growing, then yes, we would definitely need to see a modification in that scenario. Thanks.
And Chad, if I can just mention one thing, I know we're about out of time, but a common question that I get is, or a comment, I guess, is like, hey, your website's great, but it's like staring down a set of encyclopedias. I don't know where to start. And so I always direct people, it's a really good idea to start at that Get Started with IRB page. And I know we have a lot of templates and pages and, information pages and site permission templates and recruitment and consent. And a lot of people don't know which ones they actually need to use for their study. And if that's your question, down at the bottom of that Get Started with IRB page is a little link to something called a document checker, which is just a link to a quick survey. You'll fill it out, you'll answer about 20 questions, and then it's basically got the same logic built into it as our application does. And so it will prompt you and say, well, based upon how you say you're designing your study, the application is going to ask for these documents. So it should be a helpful starting guide.
Yeah, thank you for that, Kelly. That's a very useful guide on our Get Start page. So there's a feasibility checklist, but there's also a documents checklist, and it's in Qualtrics. So for those of you that are familiar with the logic in Qualtrics, you'll notice as you go through, it says, well, are you doing this? Or are you doing this? And once you say, well, I'm doing it this way, then it will say, well, these are the documents that's typically needed for a study like that. And that is a great way to get started. So thank you for that reminder, Kelly. Well, I want to thank everyone for coming. That is the end of our webinar for today. And again, within about 24 hours, you'll see this recording linked from our webpage. The PowerPoint presentation will be available in PDF form for you to download and utilize as you need. And then also we'll have a finalized Q&A. So Kelly, if I can just remind you to snag the chat and the Q&A before we end the meeting.
Will do.
I'd like to thank everybody for coming and good luck with your research. We look forward to working with those of you who will be utilizing our services. And again, feel free to email the IRB at nu.edu with any questions that you have. We're very receptive and we're hopefully efficient with our response. So thanks for coming, everyone, and have a great rest of your day.
Thank
Bye now.
you.